sacred language was always Sanskrit. Not only for the Tibetan, very surprisingly, but also for the Bonpos. The whole of the Tibetan tradition looked at India and the Sanskrit language as the source of this tradition of sacred linguistics, let's say. So this time, although time was limited, I tried to investigate a little bit in the Indian tradition to what degree of ancient times we could go back to reconstruct and to find out where the origin was of these conceptions that are still alive nowadays in the Tibetan tradition. So while I was doing that, I kind of opened a Pandora vase of informations, and I don't know if you have experience in doing this kind of research. Wherever you look, it's kind of a small, you discover a small hole upon a new world completely, and when you get there, you get lost completely. In any case, what seems to be clearly available from the ancient text of India, particularly starting from the Vedic period, so very in real ancient times, I would say more than 2.5 millennia ago at least, or that is more or less where things were, we know that things were more or less how they are transmitted now. Particularly in the Rig Veda, which is the most ancient Vedic collection of texts, the theories about language are already set forth, are already quite clearly, how to say, outlined. I chose to go looking at a few basic principles. So, language is a basic part of cosmogony in the Vedic world. Cosmogony is the way how the world came and comes into existence. They say audio is not working. Sorry for that. Sorry, really sorry for these technical problems, but I think we should go on for. It's working, okay. And so the idea, basically, I'm trying to, shorten it down and make it and boil it down to the basic concepts. There is the idea of a unmanifested principle. Generally, it's called Brahman in the Vedic language, and also in the Upanishadic language later on. Brahman in the neutral form, in the neutral gender. So it is understood as being the absolute principle, the source of everything, but which has no form, no qualities, no. It's completely arupa, they say, free of form, and it kind of had as a natural aspect of itself the basic quality of space. Now, this is a very complex topic which I did not understand myself yet. Not that this means anything, but I'm not sure, and I did not understand clearly, if space understood as empty ether, only the potentiality of allowing something to be manifested within it, if that is actually, let's say, part of this initial phase, or if it is itself folding itself out when Brahman, the absolute possibility, looks towards manifesting something, looks towards bringing into existence its own possibilities, and its own, by way of its own potentiality. Now, possibility and potentiality are a very complex topic, but I would say that I use these words for the Sanskrit equivalents of Purusha and Prakriti. Not clear about yet, and that is true also for the Tibetan tradition, is if there is ever a, let's say, reabsorption of space, as well as of all other phenomena, no? Or if space always remains as the ground. That is not clear to me. In any case, space is calling to be filled up with something. And in the Vedic text, it says that there is a steering within the absolute principle Brahman that is kind of a movement, a prana, let's say. They even use the word prana for that in some occasions. Prana, you know, is the wind, is the movement. It is also life itself. And upon this prana, at a certain point, or through or by this prana, at a certain point, sound is manifested. Sound understood as a primary vibrational force, vibrational energy. Sound is energy, no? And it is said that the first sound is A, the sound A, which is tremendously interesting, I think, for everyone that has a familiarity with Tibetan Buddhism, particularly Dzogchen. It says in the Aitareya Aranyaka, it is a text that is belonging to the Rigveda commentarial literature. It says, truly, the vowel A is the whole word. The latter, the word, becomes manifold and varied when specified by the consonants and fricatives. This, I think, is an extremely interesting quote, because it states explicitly how the original sound, the primordial sound A, is a kind of a total sum of all possible sounds, and that the other sounds, let's say starting from individual syllables, are kind of particular aspects of that, or if you like, as limited versions of that. But let's come back to the sound A. This sound A is the full potentiality of sound. It sort of comes out from the original principle and permeates the space that was already there. It is interesting also to note that sound can manifest only, at least as a outwardly projected force within time. Because if time is not there, sound cannot develop. because sound is a diachronic element. Whereas, for example, light can manifest without time in space. It needs space. So, in a certain way, it can be thought that time starts together with sound. Also, it is interesting that this tradition of considering the primordial sound is repeated in a text that we had the opportunity to, we selected to be translated in the summer course last year in Merigar, and it is the so-called single letter Prajna Paramita, mother of all Tathagatas. And it is a very interesting text, I think, because it has the usual setting of a sutra. It is maybe 1 page long, the whole sutra, Prajna Paramita Sutra, in a very short version, 1 single letter. And it says the usual settings. There is Ananda, or if I remember well, when the Bhagavan was staying at the Vulture's Peak mountain with a great number of retinue, monastics, and bodhisattvas, and so forth. And at a certain point, the Bhagavan says to Ananda, Ananda, take to heart this 1 letter Prajna Paramita for the happiness and benefit of sentient beings. Such it is. So this is the single letter. It is the Prajna Paramita itself. It is the potentiality or the primordial seed. Seed is also, maybe I have occasion to talk about that later, a very important word in terms of sounds and in terms of syllables. A is apparently understood as the root seed of any sound, and later on, when we go further down into gross manifestation of communication, of transmission of teachings, and of making others understand the teachings. So let's get back to the Vedic times, and I had another quote, but yeah, well, this Prajna Paramita is taken on by also other quotes. For example, well, let's forget about that. I will maybe come back to that later. In any case, the ancient Brahmanic text of ancient India go on to state that after this first primordial A sound, something happens to the purity and pervasiveness of this sound, and sort of act as limitations upon these sounds. And particularly, there are 2 kinds of limitations, and these are understood as aspirations and consonants. So aspirations and consonants are, so to say, restrictions of the original sound. So if we think of the human body, which is always understood since these very ancient times as a kind of microcosm reproducing in miniature the macrocosm and having a parallel development to the point that it is possible to say that each individual is a full, complete world. If we look at the human body, then when you produce the vowel A, your phonogenic organs, meaning the organs that can produce sound in your body, are completely opened. So a correctly spoken A vowel is produced by an open throat, an open mouth. The tongue is lying down on the floor of the mouth, and everything is as open as possible. By the way, also it is that A that starts with a closed throat, of which the beginning is with a closed throat. This means that there is a moment, let's say, or a point in which it goes from silence to sound, no? Like A, this one. So when the human body produces any other kind of sound, it needs to restrict the flow of the air in a more, strongly or even completely at certain point. When you just compress or close some part of the throat, you can produce, for example, aspirates, like ha, like this, no? Ha. This is an aspiration, but it does not block. It's just a slight closure of your throat. When it comes to consonants, particularly occlusives, you have to completely close the flow of the air and open again to produce a vowel. So there is another quote from the well, a thing that I should say before is that this vowel A is together with this underlying prana, which is the very vehicle upon which, or which makes it possible for the sound to be produced, not only in the human body, but also in the macrocosmic cosmogenic process, is life. Prana is sound, and both are life together. Okay, this is very interesting in terms of how it is explained in Tibetan grammar, where it is said that, for example, those consonants which lose their inherent vowel are called lifeless or dead. And it says, in fact, in the Jaiminiya Upanishad Brahmana, which is also a Vedic text, where it says, the innermost nature, Atman, of all vowels, Svara, is Indra, while that of the spirants, Ushman, is Prajapati, and of the consonants, Sparsha, is Mrityu. That is, I think, extremely interesting. First of all, let's forget about the first two. Atman, meaning the inner reality of the vowels, is Indra. Indra is the king of the gods. So is the one, king means the one who has the power to do. Then it says the spirants, meaning the aspirated sounds, are Prajapati, the father or original producer of beings. But the consonants, and it calls it Sparsha, maybe you are familiar with this word. Sparsha means also touch. they are called mrityu, which means death. Mrityu is death. So consonants, understood as occlusives, are understood as what takes off the life from the vowel. What reduces the scope of the vowel, of the original vowel, into something defined, into something manifested, into something that has limits. In fact, when you speak a consonant, you limit the flow of the air. And this is understood as being the principle of manifold manifestation. So from these differentiations of the original sounds, first of all, so-called bija mantras are produced, meaning seed syllables. No? For example, the syllables of the sounds of the various elements, no? Like, let's say, wind, fire, water, and earth, no? Because space or ether we already have. And these intermingle and produce sort of new limitations that produce, as they become grosser and grosser, as they accumulate their limitations, produce different things, the different phenomena, produce the different beings. So in a way, different phenomena and different beings can be understood from this perspective as being coagulations, is that a word in English, of and progressive consolidations of elements around a sound, which is its primordial and original life giver, let's say. No? This sound permeates and kind of collects around itself the way how phenomena come into being. Limited phenomena. Phenomena are described by their limitations, no? Like beings are defined by their limitations. They are this and that because they are not something else, okay? And everything is thought to be originally created by the sound that is their ground energy, ground vibration, ground life, let's say. In this way, Sanskrit is understood as that language which grasps the real sound of phenomena. When you speak a Sanskrit word, what you say, the vibration which you produce, is the same vibration that that phenomenon has. But it is also important to remember that sound words, let's say sounds, seed syllables, words are not dependent on a speaker or on a perceiver. They are inherent in the phenomenon itself. They are a constituent of the phenomenon itself, okay? And it is the speaker that, because he is made of the very same principles that make up the other phenomena, can have the possibility to name things correctly through the Sanskrit language. So maybe you have heard that the corpus of the Indian ancient text, like Vedic text and so forth, the ones from which I took the liberty to quote a couple of passages, are called Shruti. Shruti means to hear, that which was heard. And I think, though I have no proof for that, we are in an empirical context, because I have not read it anywhere, but I have the impression that this Shruti, hearing, Shruti means that what has been heard, no? And it is not referring to something that someone has uttered or someone has explained, but it is hearing the natural sound of the universe, hearing the underlying reality in terms of its sound, in terms of its energy, of phenomena itself. That is why once you have heard it, you can reproduce it. And by reproducing it, you can vibrate, so to say, on the same level. And that is the base and the principle that underlies all the subsequent theory and practice of mantra. Mantra is really trying to reproduce within it one's own body the vibrations of certain things, particularly the ones more close to the principle, more close to the original sound, let's say. And this, for example, through the bija mantras, the seed syllables such as Om and so forth, particularly in the Indian context. It is very interesting also to note that also in the Buddhist context, all of the sutras start with the words, you might know that, evam maya shrutam, no? So, thus I have heard is generally translated. Evam maya shrutam. Shrutam is exactly the same word as shruti, no? The same root, that which I have heard, no? And it is understood as the statement in which mostly Ananda or the other disciples of the Buddha who ask for the Buddha for teachings state in this way that they have actually heard the Buddha say that, no? But this can be also, obviously, you know, probably you know better than I do that, for example, the syllable evam has had a great fortune in the Tantric Buddhism, such as to represent, for example, Tab and Sherab and male and female and so forth, and the union of these two aspects of these two aspects. But the word shrutam also might be understood as listening to the expression of Buddhahood. Because when the Buddha was asked to explain and Ananda said, I heard so, he was actually listening and asking to the enlightened being Buddha after enlightenment. So it was the same thing. It was listening to the universe itself, or the principle, or the nature, the ultimate nature of the universe or of manifestation. So this is also said, for example, in a famous quote by that is found in Shantideva, famous Shantideva Bodhisattva Acharya Avatara, where he says something that hints into the direction in the chapter 10, verse 37. He says, "May all embodied beings unceasingly hear the sound of Dharma from birds, trees, light rays, and also from the sky." In the end, this is a reiteration of what was said before in the Vedas, what the idea of evam maya shrutam means, and so forth. So now, up to this point, we have considered, or I have considered, sound as, let's say, a non-mental phenomenon, a phenomenon not relevant to the mind, no? A meaningless sound, if you like. It is meaningless because it does not it is not necessarily directed towards the rational mind or the thinking mind to communicate something. It is just the core vibrational power of different phenomena. So at a certain point, though, like in the same way as phenomena, let's say beings, do not recognize anymore their own nature, their own belonging to that principle, they consider themselves as separated. You know, in the one of the typical cosmogonic problems about beings also in Buddhism is that by ignorance they do not recognize anymore themselves to be the Buddha. So, or to be, to have the nature of Buddha within themselves. So, in the same, and they get detached from their source, let's say. The same happened to words. Words at a certain point are not anymore, let's say, natural, but they become instruments of the mind. They are detached from their vibrational purpose, but they enter into being instruments of the mind. And from this, for example, in Tibetan, in the Tibetan tradition, there is a very clear recognition of the fact that, for example, Tibetan, which is a different language from Sanskrit, is a kind of a conventional language rather than a natural language. A language that no more has the possibility to name things by their natural name, but it is more conventional. In this way, the plurality and the manifoldness of words is created, and also the possibility and the use of words as the instrument for the mind to reason. So words become kind of the mental dimension, the mental phenomenic dimension of each individual, in the same way as phenomena, and they populate the world, the inner world of the of beings, for example, human beings, in the same way as phenomena populate the universe. So, in a way, the mind uses words to kind of acknowledge its own thoughts, and by this it goes further and further and further into, far away from its purpose of introspection. So it is kind of propending towards the outer world, the world of perception, the world of objects, the world of being attached and projected towards the objects to which it then gives a name. And it works, it organizes through words the universe which it perceives. So, coming back to the problem, why is the grammatical science considered to be a foundation of anything sacred? Why is it considered a path in its own right? Because, well, by the way, a few terminological notes. In Sanskrit, generally, the science of sound in its own, in its completeness, is called the Shabda Vidya, or the science of sound. And this refers, includes both, let's say, the science, if we were to use this modern word, as well as etymology, as well as grammar. Grammar is understood as, well, when we restrict the topic to the grammar strictus sensu, meaning how words correctly communicate meanings, then it is called in Sanskrit Vyakarana, which means analysis. And this is, I think, also extremely interesting, because it comes back to what I said before, that language just happens in its own right, and the assessment of how it works is an analytical process, is a process of studying and looking at how sounds and phenomena ultimately interact among themselves. Grammar is understood as the analysis of the whole phenomenological world, the whole world of phenomena, because it is able to establish relationships, not only to name objects, obviously, but also to express the web of relationship and represent or describe everything that happens in the world of phenomena, so that the mind can understand that. The idea of analysis is the idea of studying the reality of language, let's say. So, I don't know if I managed to be sufficiently clear, also because it's not really easy to express these things, and also because English is not my language, and so I try to also invent a few words here and there, because that's the topic. No? What I'm trying to say here is that let's say grammar is the trait d'union, let's say the common ground of the human mind with the world of phenomena, with the manifested world. Grammar, in a wider sense, gives how to say, is the expression of the common nature of the mind and the universe. Grammar articulates how there is no difference between the mind and the phenomena. I don't know if that is if I managed to make it clear what I mean. Probably not. But I want to clarify that, or I want to communicate the idea that grammar is understood as the structure of the mind, at the same time of the mind and of the objects of the mind, what the mind reasons, what the mind organizes. Okay, so it can be used to dissect and get a clear understanding up to a certain point of the relationship of the mind itself, the relationship of the mind with phenomena, how everything works in the end. And this is basically all the doctrines and philosophies and so forth that can be explained. Okay, so the grammar is the common ground, the common instrument of everything. In Tibetan, this also is reproduced, I would say, one-to-one, so that the science of sound is called Jaripa, exactly Shabda Vidya, and the grammar itself, understood as the more restricted analysis of how the language that is able to represent reality works, is called Datre, or mostly Datre. Nevertheless, this is not sufficient, because a path of realization is not concerned with the analysis of phenomena. It's not concerned with the understanding, or at least not only with the understanding of the word, but it should be mostly concentrated on how to get rid of the very limits, or a spiritual path should be concentrated mostly on putting into the hands of the practitioner the instruments to get rid of those very limits that define himself, sort of to get rid of his name, let's say. Maybe you also remember that one of the constituents of the of any being is the Namarupa complex. Namarupa means name and form, no? One of the skandhas, I think they're called. And Nama refers to essential sound, the name, no? The sound vibratory nature of the individual, and Rupa refers to the form, no? Refer to light, to sound and light, no? Nama and Rupa are the defining characteristics of each individual. So when so I have tried to show how the world is understood as, obviously in a symbolical way, as a kind of explosion. We can talk about a Big Bang, if you like, this image, in which it is, in which sort of the manifestation rides on the prana and the sound that expands and produces all things. So in a way, if you want to, you can look at it as the spiritual path being going towards backwards, going up the current of this explosion. And in doing that, one of the main things is that, at least in the tantric perspective, is that the mind gets rid of the function of words being the representation, let's say the conventional representation of thoughts or phenomena, and stripping away sounds from their meaning, or taking off the meaning from the sounds, and to merge, let's say, more into the vibrational quality of the sound itself through the and the method for this is the mantra. No, mantra typically does not have a meaning. It is also only used for its energetical power, let's say, for its energy. And this is precisely because the discursive mind cannot be understood as the instrument by which realization is achieved. On the contrary, the discursive mind has to be overcome, together with all its talking, with all its words, to achieve realization. The more you go ahead towards, let's say, getting rid of the mind, the more simple the sounds get, let's say, up to a point in which there is no sound anymore, there is no name anymore. And this is also very often expressed by the way to use negatives to express the absolute, Buddhahood, no? Buddhahood is described using mostly negatives, or it is said it cannot be named. It has no name because it's before sound. It cannot be named because it cannot be an object or a thought of the mind. So the mind, in terms of the discursive mind, is an instrument belonging to the variety of words, the variety of sounds, and it cannot, and it does not have any, let's say, any possibility to grasp beyond that. Once again, I like to quote one of my favorite quotes of Shantideva, is the one which says about the two truths, and it says, sorry, I need to refresh the Tibetan, and it says, conventional and absolute are the two truths. These are called the two truths. And it says, Töndam, the absolute truth, is not the playground of the mind. The mind, indeed, is the conventional, he says. So this is extremely, I think, doesn't need any comment, because I think it is really clear how the mind, with all its chatter of artificial and conventional words, can never grasp as its object, obviously, anything that goes beyond its reach. Mind and its words are to be forgotten about. And the principle of words can be used to go beyond that, which is the sound and the energy and the power of mantras. Okay, I think this more or less is the time. And I hope I was not too confused. It was probably very noticeable that I did not have too much time to search, but I hope that I maybe open also for you a few windows in which you can see a very big world on the other side, and maybe be interested to closely, and if you have any questions, I would really appreciate those. I don't know if you can do so from afar.
Yes.
They can do also.
Yeah, I just sent a message.
What is the, it must be a mythology of the origin of the Sanskrit language, and particularly mantra, because from what you're saying, certain sounds are inherent in, for example, the objects themselves.
Yes.
So somebody or something must have had the capacity to hear that and transmit it.
Yes. In general.
What is the? I'm thinking it must be at a mythological. It must go right back. I don't know the mythology of the Sanskrit alphabet, which obviously is then taken up by the Tibetans. Where especially in the fact that they keep all the mantra within what would be now understood to be a conventional language.
Yeah, well, the mantras are, in general, are considered as being actually this natural language, and that is why they can only be in Sanskrit. Even in Tibet, where they translated most of the text, that the parts of text that cater to the mind, they always translated. Even names they translated, for example, personal names. No, but the mantras, those, let's say, sound sequences that were to be pure sound, free from the mental aspect. Also interesting to note that one of the etymologies, in the Sanskrit language has a traditional science of etymology, which deconstructs words in terms of the syllables, no? Akshara they are called, and each syllable is then given a meaning, no? And this composition of syllables is then understood as also defining the object named in its nature for the mind, let's say. No? So, for example, mantra, the word mantra is sometimes, obviously, there are different traditions of nirukta is called this traditional etymology. For example, one of the explanation is man means mind, manas, the mind, and tra means to protect. So mantra is what protects the mind. Why? Because it links the mind to sound and takes it away from idle and silly going around. It is a protection for the mind to take itself away from this and that and that, and the the objects of perception. No, whatever you do, you obviously during the waking state. No, mind is continuously like a monkey. They describe it. No, it's continually going here and there and there and there, and it never has the, let's say, the time, we would say today, to look inwardly. So mantra is that which protects from that. And also maybe from the idea of the mind being the instrument for going anywhere. This is the problem. We have the idea that mind is something that can make things for you, but ultimately that is not that is an illusion. And probably I think in the Indian tradition, the rishis were responsible for bringing, let's say, the language for to the, let's say, the listeners who then brought. But there are many myths about that and how the Vedas, for example, came to this. Let's say the Vedas themselves are understood as being kind of the framework or the warp and the woof, I think, of the universe. No, let's say or if you like the musical charts for the orchestra of the universe, let's say.
I have a question here from Lola, and she's asking whether you've come across any Tibetan practices with singing bowls. There's quite a few questions as well.
With the singing bowls? Well, I think that belongs to the sector of music. And that is a particular, let's say, branch of sound theory, let's say. But I never came across someone who would use that as the main practice or something that goes beyond like, you know, a nice ambience or these kind of things. I'm not really sure about that.
So, John?
In the way that if you're a different being, you perceive the river a different way, how does that apply if the inherent sound is as described using Sanskrit? Do all beings have the same relationship to the inherent sound?
I don't think so. In the sense that that is a very, you know, far-going question, no? Because let's say that from the perspective of beings, actually perception is not understood as someone or an object being there, no? Like saying an object that is like that here, and someone or different beings perceiving the same object. This goes back to the fact that perception is never objective, but is subjective. Perception is creative, let's say. This is easily explained by the fact that when you, for example, perceive the cup, you don't have the cup entering your body, let's say, no? But you perceive through the eye organ, and then through the eye faculty, and then the mind organizes and produces a representation of it. And it is this representation that you actually perceive, that is actually within you, no? And this representation is normally not something universal, let's say, no? So each being perceiving a sound perceives that sound according to its own situation, what is called the karmic view. No? So let's say that in this kind of theory, it would be mostly humans or gods, let's say, that can approach the real sound a little more, a little better, because they have the ability to reproduce it also. They have a continuity. They have they belong, let's say, or they have all the aspects, the different aspects, subtle, energetical, gross, like mind, body, and speech, that for which they can sort of resonate completely and perfectly with that, and also being able to reproduce it. No? So humans are understood to be sort of the central being in this world. No?
It's similar to what Julia was asking, because this problem of this universality, the authority, or where does the authority lie in ascribing a certain resonance and the Sanskrit naming conventionally? If, say, our perspective is creative, and if it's co-creative in our relative shared experience, if more minds begin to call a cup by the sound and the word cup, at what point is there, if there's no one else referring to this cup as cup, does it still maintain its Sanskrit naming convention?
Well, it is, it does not depend, or let's say the inherent energetic or vibrational or acoustic, nature of the object does not really change in dependence of who is. It is the speaker, let's say, who, and that is why also it is extremely important to be able to reproduce Sanskrit sounds correctly. That is why Sanskrit has from really ancient time an extremely precise phonology. No? Sounds are precisely described how they should be produced in the mouth and so forth, because there is the need, like playing an instrument. No, you have to fine-tune your vibrations to the reality. But it is not that if no one is able to pronounce cup, that sort of the cup vanishes or the cup is influenced in any way. No, the cup continues in its own state, let's say. No, this brings me to another very interesting topic, or I thought it would bring me there. Yeah, maybe it comes back later.
Loki says, thank you for this very profound debate and important talk. He is mentioning E equals mc squared, sound equals wave equals energy. The superimposed energy on the wave defines its quality, also in radio techniques. How does the consonance defined as limitation the basic sound? Is this analogy to the superimposition mentioned above?
Well, I'm not really sure if I understood that, but yes, I think the kind of energy that is thought of in modern science is basically one aspect of that. No, it is in the end also understood and explained as a vibration. No, basically energy is vibration, and in truth it has always been understood as that. Not only sound but also light, for example, and heat, for example, also is understood as a vibration. Coming to the consonants, I think the one part of the question was addressing that part. The idea of the consonants, let's say, occlusive consonants particularly, those consonants that require you to close the flow of the air completely at a certain point, in generally at the beginning of the consonants. Say, for example, ka, no? The first letter of the Tibetan alphabet and also the first of the Sanskrit consonants. You have to close your throat completely and then open it up. So when you close completely, there is silence, no? So let's say from a certain point of view, the vowel is killed. The flow of the breath is killed. Obviously, I wanted to say a lot of things more, no? than what I've said, because it's really a very profound topic. For example, coming back to the original idea of the prana being the, let's say, the engine of sound being produced and moving, no? This is also the case within the human body, you know. Once again, macrocosm is the same as microcosm. And for example, the breath itself has an inherent sound, no? For some is saham or ham-sa. For some is aham, no? Inspiration, aspiration, and pause. For example, aham means I, and it's said to have the two phases of inspiration and aspiration. To be the inherent sound of inspiration, aspiration. Because when you breathe, you are alive, and you are I. When you don't breathe, you are dead, and you are not I anymore. Also, for example, I was referring to the earlier with Mike of Yangompa, no? I think it's called Secrets of the Vajra Body, which is an extremely interesting and enlightening book, also dealing with these kind of things. For example, he says that the subtle body of humans has inherent sounds, let's say, represented by letters, no? The various chakras, the various, not only the main ones, but all the peripheric chakras and so forth. They have their inherent sounds, their seed syllables, let's say. They are resident there, and these seed syllables are the same as, for example, those of some deities and so forth. But it also makes a very interesting statement that when I heard it, I had, you know, this kind of, oops. He says, when you start speaking a new language, after 6 months' time, the letters or the sounds in your chakras change. So this is very interesting idea, telling you how important speech is with regards to the subtle body, no? It's all influencing each other. If you like, mantra, it can also be understood as being, you know, making your, not only, this actually I wanted to get to, but obviously I got, you know, carried away into other things. When you speak, say, a mantra, that sound is also referring to your subtle body. It is also taking control of that. In the same way as outwardly, the correct word, the correct name, is controlling the phenomena, is the very inherent sound of that object. In the same way, your seed syllable, which is refers to the subtle body, is resonant with that. And if it is correctly produced, it activates that. Okay.
So are you of the Benza school or the Vajras?
This is also an interesting question. I would be of the Vajra because of...
If you body will change.
Yes, yes. And here the idea is that if it is transmitted that way, it means that it has been, how you say, efficacious, how you say? Effective, if you like. So if it is transmitted that way, it means that it has worked for the person or the tradition, the lineage that transmits it that way. And once again, when we come to, I think, my take about that is that when we come to inner stuff, let's say things about the subtle body and so forth, then there is no absolute, because everything is relative. I would say there is never an absolute in the relative, but it might be okay. I mean, it might be different, understood differently than in a pure Sanskrit way, let's say, that the sound is that and stays like that. When it comes to the inner body, I think their variance might be acceptable, because each body, each person, each individual is in a different situation. So for some this might work better, for some others another might be better. There is this famous history about the Dalai Lama, fifth Dalai Lama looking out from the Potala, and this one you have heard, no? So it says, in this case I would say, while there should be an effort to correct sounds, it is not said that variants do not work, are inefficacious, are useless. Yeah.
I mean, I'm just reflecting on the fact that the perception, this understanding of the power of sound, of language, seems to be more or less only in the two major religions in India, Southeast Asia. And even though that knowledge has been there for so millennia, it seems as though it never really diffused this way of perceiving this sense, this duality of language, of the absolute and relative. It's not something which is acknowledged in the West or in the monotheistic religions. I'm not sure it was ever anywhere else in the world. I find that quite curious, that you have this body of knowledge, or this really, this way of perceiving, which is very different, but it never really made it outside of Southeast Asia.
Well, I think in any...
I mean, it's all for us, obviously.
Yeah. In general...
So therefore you have some understanding and sensitivity to it.
Yeah. In general, I think most humans in general have a kind of attribute to certain utterances, power. For example, I think of in the West, more on a very lower level, like such as magic formula or blessing, for example, things, objects, which happens quite normally in Western, in monotheistic world also. But I think as far as I know, from the perspective of this kind of analysis and this kind of looking at sound from this, very early principle of manifestation downwards, let's say, is quite a unique of the Indian and then later Tibetan inherited world. One thing that I wanted to show, I don't know if I managed to do so, was to point out also how obviously, we can make a lot of differences between the various dharmas and teaching that are current in India, in Tibet, and so forth. But the core doctrinal perspective that imbues them all over time is somehow very continuous. No? There is no great fracture in these kind of things from the doctrinal point of view. And this, I think, is quite refreshing for me. No? There is a... I'm quite happy to be able to see something that, or to think about something that people 3,000 years ago thought. It's quite refreshing. It gives an idea of stability in a way, at least in the.
I'm wondering somewhere like China, where essentially you've had it's a very large population, was a Buddhist culture and obviously other cultures as well. And in a sense, it's been moved or manipulated away from that into a more materialistic or view. And I'm just wondering how that works.
Well, I think in the Chinese tradition, the sound also has a rather important position, but it is also very interesting consideration that from extremely ancient time on, the Chinese language was more concerned about writing. The Chinese characters were considered to be natural. For example, there is a myth that says that the Chinese characters were formed by the projections of the stars on Earth. And that is very much independent from sound. It is more referring to writing, to signs. No? So while Sanskrit and Tibetan are languages based on sound, the Chinese language, at least this symbolism of the language, is more based on signs, on graphics.
I think there could possibly be an analogy with Kabbalistic mysticism.
Yeah, in a way.
The sound of the name of God.
Yeah.
Sorry? In the beginning was the word.
Yes, that's also resonant with that.
Resonant with sound, and the sort of mystery over precisely how you should pronounce the name of
Yeah.
Yahweh or whatever.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think certainly in Kabbalistic practice, I don't know much about it, but I do understand there is much to do.
Yeah, basically.
Representations of absolutes.
That's right. I think also that's true for Arabic language in that sense, and in which a numeric value is given to each sound, let's say, and by that a certain, let's say, aspect of or name of the divine, God is given, or ascribed to that kind of category, no? Also.
That brings us nicely onto a question from Martin, maybe he is asking, all cultures, well, he's saying that first, all cultures with a sacred approach to language claim that their basic sounds are aspects of the manifestation of reality itself. For example, Hebrew, for example, the Kabbalah, the Old Norse language, runes, archetypes of reality. Why would Sanskrit be more real in this sense, is his question.
Well, it is more, obviously, I'm not saying that Sanskrit is more real than other things. And I don't think that, but in the Indian tradition, as well as in the Buddhist tradition, things are laid out in this way, no? And no problem if, I mean, it's just a kind of good finding to I mean, it's just positive in a way and confirming things to find the same doctrines in other places. Why not? And as I said, for what concerns particularly the inner aspect of practice, then let's say that we cannot talk about something that has universal validity. We have to consider the particular situation and condition and circumstance in which each individual finds himself. So for some people, maybe speaking Old Norse is particularly effective. Why not? Or whatever language, whatever sounds. As Yangompa said, when you speak a language, your subtle body takes a certain form, no? And that form might be particularly useful for those people, you know, for the people using them. That is probably also explains. Obviously, you know, we can talk a lot about languages, no? But one thing that differentiates languages is also the character of the people who speak them, I think, no? Speakers of different languages tend to have, at least to a certain point, certain similar characteristics, no? In fact, languages unite much more than national borders, let's say, no? So I would say that linguistic groups are much more coherent and homogeneous rather than national groups, let's say. No? I don't know if you notice the same thing, but for example, people speaking Italian or people speaking Spanish, no? They have a character to their voice, how they use their voice, how they pronounce things, how they relate with each other, and probably also how they think. No? This is also one topic. Probably I announced it in the presentation, but I did not talk very much about that. Words do have a. Words are like beings. No? They have. They live within their languages. Okay, so the people who use them, they partake of this life. They partake of these aspects, and so they are influenced by it. No? Their body is probably looking different from for those like Yangompa who were able to see them. Okay.
And just to go back, is there what is said about the difference between chanting a mantra outwardly or inwardly with one's mind, and how that affects one's body?
Well, the more well, this is, I think, the word outwardly and inwardly explain themselves. No, like. Obviously, yeah, this is belonging to the technique of mantra practice, but the main thing is the association of the, well, first of all, one thing that I should have said before is that sound has to be understood as having, in the Sanskrit, in the Indian tradition as well as in the Tibetan, having of degrees of subtleness or grossness. No? So what is your outer speech, let's say, is the grossest level which you can work with. No? And the less outward you go and the more inward you go, the more subtle it becomes, the level to which you work with your mantra. One of the important things in any case is that it's always linked with the breath, with breathing, no? Because it is really functioning together with the breathing. No? The subtle body works with is alive through breathing, and as I said, it has its natural sound. No, but it's not a sound that if you you close your ears, you can listen to this and that sound in your body. No, it's a subtle body. It's a subtle sound. It's not something that is the object of the ears. No, and also. It is reabsorbed up to being more and more and more and more subtle, to the point in which in the end even breathing ceases. No, in the ideal samadhi, let's say concentration, even the breathing is not anymore so gross, at least. It is becoming subtler and subtler and subtler. So obviously these are all the different levels at which you can, from the outer, you probably start from the outer and go back to the source. Okay. Yeah.
So we have two more questions here, if that's okay, Pavlin. Lola is asking, is it true that each letter of Sanskrit alphabet vibrates in different parts of the body? While reading the alphabet, we heal the body with the vibrations of the letters.
Yes, that's a possibility. In fact, well, it depends what healing means. Obviously, the body is a composite phenomenon, so it is subject to decay. In any case, yes, the different letters of the alphabet, which are called alikali in the Sanskrit alphabet, no, including the 16 vowels and the 32, I think, or 34 consonants, they are understood as the like the primary sounds or primary notes, if you like, that can compose any music. No, primary sound that can compose any word. Okay, so they are considered sort of the principles of language, and thus they are present in any sort of latent or apparent. They are present in any phenomenon, let's say, in a way or another. In the body as well, for example.
Perhaps some later talk could develop the point about how language reflects how the thought process takes place.
Oh yes, yeah.
Because I mean, you were talking when you earlier one of the weekends about how Tibetan grammar reflects the action of karma.
Yeah.
And I think Noam Chomsky makes a similar point in relation to Chinese, particularly in relation to Chinese sort of pictograms, sort of describe a process of thought that is quite different to a Western sort of subject-verb-object process of thought.
Yes.
And that's a very interesting subject, how that thing, how it reflects the way of thinking.
Yes, yes. Definitely, that is a very interesting topic. I think, particularly when related to, well, at least from my perspective, to Tibetan language, because you can really see how, well, the case of Tibetan is particular because classical Tibetan, at least, has been shaped to be able to represent the Dharma. And the Dharma is kind of very deeply embedded in how things are expressed. And thus, the process of thought by the tool of Tibetan language is obviously different than using another tool. No, I don't know if you have experience with multiple languages, but when you come to a certain point of proficiency in a language, you start to think in that language also. And maybe the thoughts you do in that language are different from the thought you would do in another language. No? This occurs to me.
It's interesting you say that because I went to see Atto Rinpoche talking over the weekend, and it suddenly twigged why he spoke the way he did. Because his English reflects Tibetan grammar.
Yeah, sometimes impossible to. Yeah.
Stefan, we've got a question from Sanjay. He is thanking you for an interesting and informative. He would like to hear your take on whether and how the vibrational potency of a text changes when translated in another language, provided the embedded meaning is not changed. For example, some Dharma practitioners use text translated on their original language, but not from the original text.
That is a very interesting question and a very big problem, to be honest. I would say, well, personally, I think Tibetan cannot be translated. In the sense that when you translate Tibetan is very often, particularly obviously in when it talks about teachings and particularly the deeper aspects of the teachings, it is designed to be highly technical, meaning that words are not confined to single meanings. Words represent words or sentences represents whole, sections of the Dharma just by saying that. For example, what I said before, the sentence Evam Maya Shrutam, no? by the first onset of any sutra. In Tibetan you say Dagi Töpa, Dike Dagi Töpa. No? These things by me heard, let's say, more or less. The way the grammar is treated here is very implying a lot of different aspects, let alone the Sanskrit, but even the Tibetan managed to reproduce a whole world in just a few words. But when you translate them, this word is flattened down to a single dimension. This is one problem. One problem that refers to intelligibility, of the text, meaning that can you get the whole range of the meanings implied in the original text via a translation? I would say no. Can you use particular kinds of texts, such as sadhana texts or invocation texts, in a translated way? Again, I would say no, because these texts, let's say in general, were designed to be, how you say, efficacious, effective in the original language.
Yeah.
For example, say a Dharma teaching by Guru Padmasambhava that is designed for the worship of a certain deity. No? That text is powerful with regards to that deity because, according to tradition, Guru Padmasambhava has tamed that being and bound it to the vow to respond to that very text. And that very text is in Tibetan. And you cannot translate it because it would lose its efficacy.
So there's another question on here as well from Chris, who's asking, what are the ramifications of pronouncing a mantra incorrectly?
Which one?
There's another question here from Chris that's basically asking what are the ramifications of pronouncing a mantra incorrectly or badly?
Well, obviously, what I'm talking are my ideas, and they have to be, well, my take unavoidably. There are various possibilities, I think. Generally, I would say they are their effectiveness or efficacy is lost. No. So if you don't pronounce it correctly, you just do something wrong. Where that might take you, I don't know. No, how your body might change, I don't know. But we say so many things during our lives that it's difficult to say what we are actually doing in that respect. No. Then there is the possibility of some intentional reversion of the mantras and so forth, no? That may be done but for some negative purpose. That's also possible, I think. Okay, I think we can call it a day. Thank you very much for your attention. Okay.
Thank you, Fabienne. We could go on, I can see, talking.
Well,
I mean,
it is an enormous topic.